Hey humans, it's Danny here. You know how much I love Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection, previously called Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, and that name change came about because it now supports Macintosh computers. However, today, that's not what I want to focus on. What I want to show you in a few short minutes is a little bit about threat and vulnerability management. So this dashboard here, the new threat and vulnerability management dashboard in Microsoft Defender ATP is all about giving me an idea of what the exposure and risk is of computers in my environment. So similar to the secure score for Microsoft Defender ATP that we've seen in security operations or secure score under the dashboards, or the secure score in Office 365 where a higher score was better. We have implemented recommendations, security recommendations provided by Microsoft. In this case, my exposure score is kind of the reverse. The lower I'm exposed to threats and vulnerabilities, the better. So in my case, I've got an exposure score of 45, and that's based on security recommendations. You can see on the right-hand side there, we've got top security recommendations, 5 out of 44. So there are 44 security recommendations that are applicable to the computers that are reporting back to ATP, so specific to my environment. I've got an exposure distribution there, which tells me how many of those recommendations or how many of my computers have risks that are classified as high. So I might want to target those remediations or those security recommendations first. I've got a configuration score, which is broken down on the type of security configuration across my fleet, so application OS, etc. You can see in that list. I've got a list of the top vulnerable software or a summary of the top vulnerable software and the top exposed machines in my environment and what their exposure level is, again, to help me target or prioritize what I should be targeting first. If we flick down to security recommendations, what we're going to see here is a bunch of security recommendations to improve my exposure score. So there are a bunch of things I can do here. You know, I can update Windows 10. That's pretty important. If you're looking for a reason to update Windows 10, here's a reason. Threat Insights is telling me that there's a public exploit available for one or more weaknesses relating to Windows 10. So you can see there in my weakness list, there are a bunch of weaknesses, particularly around Windows 10, and also for each individual application or each individual configuration setting. So you can see on the right-hand side, I can go ahead and filter based on software update. So what are the security recommendations that will be resolved by software updates, the remediation type, and which of those are configuration changes. So you can see the bulk in my environment are related to configuration changes. And then I can go ahead and I can filter on application in my environment as well. So what I'm seeing here in security recommendations is around Flash. I can block Flash activation in Office documents. Now, I get a summary when I click on that of the potential risk of leaving that functionality enabled. Now, if I disable that functionality, then it's going to improve the exposure of my machine, regardless of whether there's a known exploit available or not. So it might be a good idea for me to go ahead and do that. However, you know, in some environments, you might require Flash activation in Office documents. So it's not applicable for you to go ahead and uh, enact that security recommendation or go ahead and remediate that security recommendation. And I guess I want to point out here that the whole goal here is not to get my exposure score to zero because the recommendations that we're getting might not all be applicable to your environment. We want to get our exposure score as low as possible, and we want to use this information to help us prioritize our security. But there are some situations where obviously things are not going to be applicable to your environment or changes are not going to be applicable to your environment. Moving on to software inventory, and this is a section I really like in the threat and vulnerability management section of MDATP is I get information here on all my Microsoft products, as you can see, but I'm also getting some meaningful information about the vulnerability or the exploits or weaknesses available for non-Microsoft applications. So in this case, you can see I've got JRE and 7-zip installed, and thankfully there are no weaknesses on those applications, and there are no exposed machines. It's installed on one machine, and I've got no exposures. You can see for Edge, Internet Explorer, and Windows 10, there are some threats available or some known threats and vulnerabilities available for those applications, available to be taken advantage of. So if I go ahead and click on 7-zip, actually that's probably not a good example. Let's go and click on Microsoft Edge. So it tells me, again, a summary that slides in from the right-hand side there about what the are there any exploits available, what my recommendations impact will be, so it helps me prioritize again. And if I open the software page, this is going to give me like a drill down in that application. So what are the security recommendations related to that? What are the discovered vulnerabilities? What are the installed machines that I need to or might want to target that are vulnerable in that way or have that weakness and have an exploit, or they might have an exploit available? And again, what the version is. Um, all right, that's all I wanted to cover off today. I hope it's been useful. Hope you've enjoyed. I'll talk to you again soon. Until then, stay secure.